Concern among economists about the recent depreciation of the rand against other major currencies, including the US dollar. It's also raised questions for some investors about whether to continue investing in the rand as one of the emerging weaker currencies at the moment. Let's talk about this with Harry Scherzer, CEO at Future Forex. Harry, a very good afternoon to you. So how precarious is the situation around the rand at the moment?
Hi, Timbukile. Thanks so much for having me on. Yeah, so it's been quite a rocky ride for the rand. We saw it go to lows of almost 20 to the dollar. I think it peaked at 19.82. But luckily, this week it's come down back to sub 19, which is a very welcome sight for all importers and anyone in South Africa, really.
And what are the driving factors, really?
So the reason that the rand's gone for a bit of a tumble, there are two main factors, and those are the energy crisis getting worse with load shedding and the supposed allegiances to Russia that the Western world is suspecting of South Africa. And really, typically when the rand depreciates, it's usually because of global risk sentiment being a bit higher, a bit lower. In other words, people wanting to move away from emerging currencies. But recently, it's been things within our borders, the two factors I just mentioned, which are where investors are really looking when pricing the rand.
And there's also, you mentioned the issue of Russia, for example. South Africa at the moment is going to institute its own investigation into whether weapons from this country were given to Russia to aid in its war on Ukraine. Do investors care a great deal about that at the moment, or is the worry more about potential sanctions if it even gets to that point when there's an outcome from the investigation?
Yeah, Timbukile, I think that's a fantastic question, and really it all relates to the same thing. It relates to how tightly are South Africa pinned with Russia. In other words, how far would we go to support Russia versus the Western world? And obviously, by being too overtly pro-Russia, we could face sanctions and other economic stringencies which make it difficult for us to do business. And as a result, the rand would naturally weaken. So investors really would care naturally if we did supply Russia with arms, because what it would effectively mean is that sanctions may be imposed. And as a result, South Africa would be a less attractive place to do business and the rand would go for a bigger tumble. So I think it all links to one thing, which is that we really hope that this is disproved and the allegations are false.
And Harry, would the greatest source of reluctance from global investors when it comes to South Africa have more to do with, A, a reluctance, yes, to put new money into the country, or B, potentially taking money that's already in this country and perhaps putting it elsewhere where there's less perceived risk?
Yeah, Timbukile, so there's been a massive sell-off recently of the rand. So I think it's more money that's in the country where people are basically saying, look, we can't suffer the political risk at the moment with the energy crisis being unresolved and with supposed allegiances to Russia. It's very, very difficult for investors to justify keeping their money here. Of course, along with that, no new money will be coming in. But I think the major reason for the rand depreciating recently is a sell-off of South African assets.
And what about the news we got this week from Stats SA that we've been able to avert a technical recession? If these concerns aren't put to bed soon, what would be the potential implications, I wonder, for any future hopes of averting a recession?
Yeah, Timbukile, I'm delighted we avoided the technical recession because it means greater sentiment towards South Africa. But if I'm totally honest, the technical recession metric doesn't make that much sense to me because really, by definition, a technical recession is avoiding a recession 2 quarters in a row. And if you look what's happened to South Africa, we went down 1.1% 2 quarters ago and went up 0.4% last quarter, which is still a net negative. So there still is a downward trend of South Africa. So really, we got lucky to escape a technical recession, but it's not looking good, and we're certainly not out of the woods yet. So there have to be major improvements from a governmental level in terms of improving on load shedding and showing more allegiances to the Western world to sustainably ensure that we have GDP growth quarter on quarter.
And aligning more with the Western world, I wonder how much of a need that is for the South African economy at this point when you consider that the Russians, the Chinese, for example, Brazil, India as well, who are part of the BRICS organization, would be also trying to increase, perhaps, hopefully, on the strength of that formation of countries. Would that be a viable alternative to alignment with the West in terms of future economic prosperity?
Tembekile, it's a great question, and it is something that's been on a lot of people's mind. Is it better to just kind of ignore America entirely and say, hold on, we can focus on the non-Western world as our trading partners? But really, if we look at where the world is centered, and if we look at where South Africa is, right now, America is our second biggest trading partner, and we've got plenty of Western countries that we trade with very often. So if we were to do that, and we were to have that strategy, it would result in a massive decrease in the rand because we'd lose a lot of current business. And really, the optimal strategy here has to be to keep the West happy, but also to ensure we don't lose our relationship with the other partners, the BRICS members, etc. So really, we've got this balancing act where we need to ensure everyone's happy with us. But right now, I personally feel we're leaning a bit too far towards the BRICS members and Russia in particular, and not closely enough with the Western world, where that is a large portion of our trading partners.
And when you talk about trade at the moment in currencies, there's a push for so-called de-dollarization. Would that be to our benefit, a global trading environment that is less reliant on the dollar as the currency of business?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, it would be a whole new shake-up in the currency system and the international trade system entirely if there were de-dollarization. I'll be honest with you, Tembekile. I think although there are pushes for this, I think we're far away from that being a reality. And so I wouldn't put our strategy as a country in the hopes of a de-dollarization and hence basically making enemies with America. I'd rather take the status quo and say, because the dollar is the international currency which is used typically by everyone, that is the partner that we need to impress and stay close to until such movements are more of a reality.
So the end of the conflict or the Russian invasion of Ukraine is something that at this stage is more of a longer-term goal for the two countries themselves and the global community, right? Load shedding at this stage, here domestically, we don't have a clear date for the end of that. What happens then in the short term to ensure stability for the rand?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, we've been able to improve on load shedding recently, quite drastically, in fact. And that's why we've seen this uptick in the rand from the lows we were seeing a week or two ago to back below 19 to 1. The reason for that is, number one, that Ramaphosa went to Russia or is going to Russia to basically convince Putin not to come to South Africa because he doesn't want to contravene ICC orders to arrest Putin when he arrives in South Africa. So he's effectively showing that he is caring about the Western world and that it is important that we don't directly contravene them. So that was the first factor. And the second factor, as you mentioned, is load shedding. The fact that there were improvements in load shedding this week, and there seems to be some signs of recovery. So really, those are the two focus areas for South Africa right now. If I were part of the South African government, I would put all my focus into ensuring that we regain the trust of the Western world and the investors in the Western world, while also ensuring that we do everything we can to improve the power crisis however we can.
Harry Scherzer, good to speak to you, CEO at Future Forex. Thank you for your time.